Doncic wins the game at the buzzer.
The More Better Podcast.
What up, everyone? Welcome into the Board Better Show. I'm your host, Josh, riding solo today to go through all the happenings in the NBA, taking a look at the landscape, the league, today's best bets, and of course, everyone's favorite squad ride, which we will get into at the end. But plenty to talk through, obviously. Today's homework review section is just going to be on the big Kyrie Irving news, and then obviously the domino effect it has. We'll touch on the New Orleans Pelicans as well, who look like they're going to right the ship, I think, in the short term, and then what that means for them long term this season, and of course going forward. And then I will give you both, I'll give you all, an update on my two best bets for today, how they're looking in the marketplace, what we can expect there, and then we will get to that squad ride section, of course, for everyone. But let's dive straight into it today. Let's get into our homework review. And like I said, it is going to be around Kyrie Irving, the trade finally going down. He's headed to Dallas. Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and future first rounder in return. However, it seems like the Brooklyn Nets are on the phone to try and get a third team involved. Spencer Dinwiddie might not even make it to Brooklyn. The latest rumblings that it is Toronto on the phone, that they are trying to get a deal for Fred VanVleet over the line that will send Dinwiddie up north of the border and pair Fred VanVleet with Kevin Durant, which would be a really interesting squad, I think, that they would have assembled in return for Kyrie. So this, for me, really one of those weird, I think, or rare occasions where both teams can say they've come out on top. And I don't understand the trash talking going Dallas's way here as to why they acquired Kyrie Irving. I think that the why is just so self-explanatory. They needed a second superstar alongside Luka Doncic, period. And they've got one now. And ultimately, they're better placed now than what they were a week ago to make any sort of meaningful run in the West, and to also make any meaningful strides going forward with the roster, and to be able to actually construct it in a meaningful way that allows them to sort of best get the strengths of both those superstars to the forefront without having to necessarily sacrifice too much defensively. So obviously I do agree that losing Finney-Smith in particular is pretty big on the defensive end, largely because of the fact that he is their best on-ball defender by quite some margin. Defensive wings are such a sought-after commodity in the league right now. But again, this is a team that has been bottom 10 in basically every defensive metric this season for the entirety of the campaign so far. They've shown no signs of turning that around. And yet, we're still trying to hang our hats on the fact that losing Finney-Smith is somehow going to make the Dallas Mavericks worse despite getting Kyrie Irving. And I think, the simple fact is it doesn't matter what you think of Kyrie off the court. Judging purely from an on-court impact, he is still a top 15 player in the league for me. Top 20 player at worst, I think, for most people's lists. What he can do offensively in terms of scoring the basketball is scary at times. And you pair that with Luka, and I think that this offense has the potential to be better than the one that featured Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving together in Brooklyn, for the simple fact that I'm not saying Luka is necessarily a better player right now than Durant, but I think he better complements Kyrie Irving because of what he can do with the ball as a playmaker. What he can do as a scorer and the pressure that he puts on defenses. He can play in the post. He can get to the rim. He forces defenses to have to collapse. And he can make the right pass basically every single time. So I do understand the question marks around the fit, but it's the same as, when we saw Chris Paul join James Harden in Houston and everyone said there's only one ball. This isn't going to work. It worked. I mean, if they didn't miss a record 20 plus 3-pointers in a row against Golden State, they would have been in an NBA finals and potentially had a ring to their name. So it works. I think superstars make it work. And even with two guys who are high usage, who like the ball in their hand, we saw Kyrie play alongside Harden as well in Brooklyn. I mean, we didn't get a large sample size there for sure, but he very much accepted his role as essentially the shooting guard. James Harden was the point guard. James Harden had the ball in his hand. Kyrie was able to just inject himself where need be. And if he again takes that role in his stride, then this offense is super scary. What the space that he's going to be able to operate in the mid range, like I said, just the complementary piece that Luka provides to him versus Durant. Durant's an excellent scorer, fantastic scorer, but it was very much a case of your turn, my turn in Brooklyn, where they would both operate in the mid range, both could put enormous pressure on defenses, play isolation. Again, it's going to be a case where there's a lot of ISO ball between him and Luka Doncic, but at the same time, the difference being the pressure, I think, like I said, that Luka can put on the basket and inside the paint that's going to provide Kyrie with all this open space around the mid-range to operate, especially on the perimeter, of course, as well. I don't think these Dallas shooters are going to ever have to deal with contested shots from deep again when you have these two guys on the floor together. They're going to be able to create so much separation, so much pressure provided on defenses to have to make decisions that ultimately you have two very high IQ players that can pick apart your teams in half-court sets. So I get the concerns, but I am very strongly of the opinion that Dallas is immensely better now with Kyrie, not just in the short term, but the long term, if of course they are able to sign him to stay on board and to then build the roster around these two superstars as opposed to just, just the one superstar and having to fit sort of, round pegs into square holes per se. I think as well, there was a very clear understanding that they wanted to get off of the contracts of Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, where they're not necessarily team-friendly contracts when you're trying to build championship rosters from the ground up, essentially. And I think that's the situation that they had found themselves in, where they were valuable commodities in trade pieces and assets that they can use in trade situations like they have done. But they aren't necessarily guys that are going to elevate your team in a meaningful way when, you're clearly lacking a second star. So just the domino effect, Christian Wood now becoming a third option is a scary proposition as well. Like I said, the scoring potential for this team on offense is as good as any team in the league right now. I think, they'll be right thereabouts to Denver and Boston in terms of their offensive efficiency. The question mark is, can they make it click in such a short period of time? We don't see teams make trades at this point of the season and have it all fall together and in line before the postseason. So, like I said, the pressure now for, I think, Mark Cuban, that front office, is going to be, can they tie Kyrie down to a long-term deal? And then what can they do to fill out the roster in the offseason? But, it's a trade that had to be done. I cannot for the life of me work out why people think that the Mavs made a big mistake here. They've been screaming for a superstar. It was literally 2 weeks ago where you log on Twitter and everyone is screaming for a superstar alongside Luka Doncic, and now we've got one, and apparently it's the worst possible outcome in the world, and it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I understand, like I said, the off-court drama that Kyrie might bring to the table and the potential tension that he brings to locker rooms at times, but at the end of the day, you don't win championships in the NBA without superstars. You need superstars on the roster. They now have two superstars on the roster and can actually start to make the right moves, I think, around, like I said, these two guys in order to take the right steps in the right direction, because otherwise it was going to be too much Luka ISO ball, and one guy cannot win you things in the NBA playoffs period. You need two guys at the absolute minimum these days. So I think a big win, obviously, for the Mavs here. Like I said, you look at the on-court numbers that Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith had both this season and last season. They're not really losing much at all, like I said, aside from Dorian Finney-Smith's on-ball defense in the playoffs specifically. But that's going to be an issue that obviously that Jason Kidd will have to sort of scheme for when the time comes. But Kyrie Irving's on-ball offensive metrics as good as basically any scorer in the league. I'm still just a big believer in this trade being far more beneficial for Dallas than what I think the wider public seems to be assuming. So for me, before we sign off, I think I'm not necessarily going to be in a rush to bet Dallas to win championship, to win the Western Conference this season. The roster is still flawed. There is absolutely no debating that whatsoever. But they are just in a far better position having another superstar on the roster than what they would be otherwise. So let's sign off there and leave it at that. I think that the next step, obviously, is going to be what happens in Brooklyn. Obviously, a lot of talk around Kevin Durant's future there. The Nets are sort of scrambling now to try and build a roster around him. They maintain that he's still going to obviously stay there and that they do have the pieces to facilitate him in a meaningful way. As much as I like the trade and the return that they got, because it's obviously impossible to actually get true value for a superstar who has publicly admitted to wanting out, and then of course coupled with the fact that he is on an expiring contract, means that they're limited in what they can do. But I do think they got a good return. But at the same time, that roster as currently constructed with Kevin Durant and then the next best pieces being Spencer Dinwiddie, Nicholas Claxton, that's not a team that's going to win the East or even compete with any of the top three teams, in my opinion, around them. So they still need to make something pretty drastic happen. Even if they do somehow push that deal for Fred VanVleet through for Dinwiddie, I still don't think that's enough to really elevate the team into genuine championship contention. In which case, maybe they do get pressured into having to move Durant before the deadline as well. So that obviously will have pretty big repercussions around the league. So looking forward to seeing how the rest of this trade deadline plays out. I think that there's going to be plenty on offer for a lot of teams. There's going to be a lot of buyers looking to try and improve rosters in big ways and just small ways as well. So a lot to look forward to in the NBA this coming week. Let's just leave it as Dallas were a winner in this trade, and I think Brooklyn as well were a winner in their own right, getting back what they did for that circumstance and situation. But let's dive in now to our scouting report, because I want to take a look at, like I said, the New Orleans Pelicans here, who have now won back-to-back games after snapping a 10-game slide. And just looking, I think, heading into the All-Star break specifically, I think this is obviously going to be a buy team in the short term, where the market obviously has tumbled a little bit too low on them. Brandon Ingram has his legs back now. He was obviously going to be shaky those first couple of games after such a significant period of time out, and dealing with a foot injury is not necessarily something that's easy to come back off in the NBA. So the short-term answer for them is, look to try and buy them in specific spots, I think, more often than not. But the longer-term question now, it's tough to see exactly what the ceiling is for this team this season. I think obviously in future seasons, they have all the assets and talent available at their disposal to genuinely be one of the best teams in the Western Conference for the next 2, 3, 4 seasons. But for this season specifically, obviously it's all going to come back on what shape does Zion Williamson come back to the floor on? Is he able to basically pick up from where he left off? If he is, then, this starting five is still elite in their own right. They're a plus 10.1 point differential per 100 possessions when these guys are on the floor. Their offensive rating are 120.7 points per 100 possessions, near 58% effective field goal percentage. That starting five, we know, can basically hold their own against anyone. And I think when it comes to a best of 7 series, a lot of what we are going to be looking for is matchup specific opportunities for them, where if things fall in place for them, I think that there's a very realistic chance that this team can in fact make a Western Conference Finals. But if things sort of, bottom out per se, then yeah, there's absolutely a chance that this team is a first round exit, unfortunately for them this season. But I don't think that necessarily hinders their future too much. Like I said, they just have so much in the way of assets and talent already on the roster for them to make strides in the right direction in coming seasons. I do think Willie Green's the right guy as well to take them forward with what he already has available to him. So the long-term outlook for me for the Pelicans this season will just be about playing them on a series-to-series basis in the playoffs, depending on who it is they match up with. I think, like I said, there's opportunity for them to make a really good run, depending on what they have in front of them. Specific matchups, like I think Memphis Grizzlies, for example, is a team that they would match up really well with in a best of 7 in those half-court sets. Something, where their length and size can cause a lot of issues for the Grizzlies in half court with their defense, and offensively, guys like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson can really expose some mismatches, I think, in their favor in scoring the basketball consistently at that end of the floor. So definitely going to be matchup dependent. I don't have any intention of buying futures on the Pelicans right now to win the West, to win their division, to win a championship. But I do think that there is a lot of potential for value to be had with them, just given that they have had to deal with so many injuries for such a large bulk of the season that it's kind of impacted their true market rating. I don't think they're quite the team that was, basically first in the Western Conference before everybody started getting injured. I obviously definitely don't think that they are where they are right now either, and on the fringe of having to deal with a playing situation. It's definitely somewhere in between the two. I still think they're a top 4 team when fully healthy in the West, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think, given the landscape of the Western Conference right now, where everybody is basically capable of beating anybody depending on how the matchups fall once the playoffs do come around. So the one thing I will say again with the Pelicans short term, definitely look to buy on this team. Now that Ingram's back with some minutes under his belt, I think the rotations are looking a little bit sturdier now than what they were during that 10-game losing streak, that's for certain. And they should definitely, I think, be active as well heading into this trade deadline. I do agree they need more shooting around Zion, most definitely. That was my biggest question mark for this team coming into the season, was the lack of shooting on the roster. Outside of Trey Murphy, there's not really anyone you can rely on to consistently score from beyond the arc. CJ McCollum, Jonas Valanciunas take a lot of threes for their positions, but they're not necessarily the catch and shoot snipers you want around guys like Ingram, who can operate in the mid-range, Zion, who can put pressure on the rim. Herb Jones, as good as he is defensively, still is that offensive liability until he can sort of prove himself to be a reliable catch and shoot guy that defenses have to respect on the perimeter. So shooting is the one area I hope that they target in the lead up to this trade deadline, and I think that they will. It doesn't have to be anything necessarily eye-opening. I mean, I can see the Bojan Bogdanovic potential. Obviously, he's going to make any contender a genuine threat with what he brings to the table, but it doesn't have to be of that magnitude either. I think it can just be someone that they can rely on to space the floor consistently, and that they can run out with multiple lineups to give them that extra outside threat. And obviously, when you have that outside threat and you have guys like Ingram and Zion who can operate mid-range and attacking the basket to put pressure on defenses there, then that's when this offense can genuinely take another step forward. So yeah, I think that short term that this team is absolutely a buy-on team. And long term, I think that we will try and target this team specifically in matchup situations. I don't think that buying them to win the West or to win a championship is necessarily the best value in the marketplace right now. Just looking at the landscape of the West and then the flaws that I think still exist on this roster to a certain extent. So that's me for the scouting report for the New Orleans Pelicans. Let's see how it all comes together for them in these coming weeks, and then what happens next for them if we do get the roster shake up there. It'll be interesting to see just how much it elevates their floor and their ceiling this season. But this is certainly a team that's going to be there or thereabouts for years to come, so long as they maintain their assets and their players. And of course, that Zion's able to actually stay on the floor for a duration of time that's actually meaningful, and especially when it comes to the playoffs itself. So that'll be them for now. But let's dive in quickly to today's best bets. And then we can do our squad ride, and we'll tackle a lot of these questions that are coming through in the live chat as well. Just the 2 bets for me today. Detroit Pistons plus 11 at home to my beloved Boston Celtics. That one down to 10.5 now. Jaylen Brown questionable as well, so if he's out, that'll probably tick a little bit lower. Maybe it goes back to its opener of 11. I think if he's in, I don't think the market necessarily adjusting too much to him potentially being out just yet, but ultimately just too many points for me. I kind of have this at about 9.5. The most I can get it to is 10. Like I've spoken about on this show before, I think that the reality is the Boston Celtics are still a little bit overvalued in the marketplace when they don't have someone like Marcus Smart running their offense. We spoke about the offensive metrics and how much they dip in terms of assist percentage, in terms of pace, in terms of effective field goal percentage when he's not on the floor. Those things are all still very true. So for me, the Detroit Pistons just catching too many points here at home. I think they can certainly keep it competitive enough anyway. A team that's going to play their guys for basically the full 48 where possible as well. I think the entire team is essentially blowout proof, where you don't have to worry about them sitting guys, and that back door is always going to be open. So Pistons plus 11, got in at 239.5 for the over on Milwaukee Portland, which is up to 242. I make it 244 flat. So still a little bit of market value there if you're late to the table. Obviously, a little bit hesitant on actually recommending you take it now versus what a lot of us locked in the Discord and on BetStamp when the markets were available and opened. This one pretty simple. Two teams who offensively, their ratings of late have been very, very high. Defensively, Portland are pretty much as bad as it gets. No use of Nurkic doesn't really help him. It doesn't really help them, I sort of think, in terms of what he does defensively, which is not all that much. So there's not really a big downgrade in that regard. But at the same time, this is still a team who has been bottom 5 in terms of points per possession allowed at the rim. And you're talking about a Milwaukee team with Giannis who can get to the rim basically at will, especially in transition. So Portland at home have been a little bit more up-tempo, play more possessions as well. Milwaukee happy to obviously return serve there. Defensively, we know the Bucks' Achilles heel, if you will, is on the perimeter and allowing guards to get looks that they want. Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard, basically going to heave as much as any backcourt duo in the league. And those opportunities will be there as well against this Bucks defense. So they're not interested in challenging Giannis and Brook Lopez at the rim. They'll be happy to space the floor. Jeremy Grant as well should get plenty of looks in the corner. As long as those shots are falling for Portland, we are going to get a pretty good look at this one going well over this number, even at a really inflated total. So good opportunities there, good market positions once again. Both these games, hopefully we keep trending in the right direction for both of those. I did show an edge on Portland initially, plus 4.5, as gross as that is. My number is actually 2 in that one, but I'd much prefer the over, and I don't think I really want to be standing in front of this Milwaukee juggernaut at the moment. They've won 6 straight games. They've covered, I think it's 7 of the last 10. Now they certainly seem to have turned a corner and clicked. And like I said in the homework review on the Bucks last time on the show, this is a team who offensively I think can blow the doors down on some really bad defenses. And Portland, unfortunately, is one of those really bad defenses right now. So the Bucks absolutely could basically name their score, I think, in this one, and certainly score at a clip that's high enough to clear the total. So I'm not going to be going with the edge on Portland. I'm just going to leave it at the total here at that. And basically that's all for this card. I don't have any intention of making any more late plays here unless there is some late injury news where the market might not adjust in the way that I expect it to. But happy to just ride these two out. And like I said, let's keep moving in the right direction there. 157, 163 is our record, just under 50%, but hopefully we can claw that back by the time the All-Star break comes around and make a really strong run home from there. Given the market positions we're getting, I'm pretty confident that we are going to start to flip these results in a pretty big and meaningful way. Let's get into the one segment, though, that everyone is here for. It is time officially for our squad ride.
You're very confident, I'll say that. But you shouldn't be.
All right, everyone. Time for Squad Ride. This is the segment that everyone is tuning in for. I will pull up the Discord chat now. If you haven't already joined, please make sure you click the link at the bottom of the YouTube chat here. Come and join the conversation. Put in your best bets and we can discuss them here on the show. We ended up with a loser last time out on Anthony Edwards props. So I believe the Squad Ride record is now at 4-3 on the show. Shout out to Zachariah, whose contributions have gone 0-2 on the show for Squad Rides. So let's see what we have in store for today. We'll start with those first quarter ones, the most popular Squad Ride selection. The Bucks first quarter -1 is a pretty big play. I don't even know if we go any further than that. Just the fact that so many of you have submitted that as your top play kind of goes in line as well with what I said last time, where the Bucks coming out the gates in these first quarter, first half situations against bad defenses, they really do basically put their foot down, and there is very little I imagine that Portland's going to be able to do to slow them down if those shots are falling from deep, and they're going to be able to get whatever it is that they want at the rim as well against one of the worst paint defenses in the NBA. So it's tough to even go beyond that. Bucks first quarter team total over 30.5. I agree with that as well. That basically falls in line with everything we've said and agree on so far. A couple of the prop ones that have stood out. Let's have a look. Jordan Poole over 3.5 turnovers. I think that's a really good look. Obviously, without Curry, he's going to have the ball in his hands more. He's turnover prone at the best of times. And you're talking about an OKC defense that is fantastic at forcing turnovers as well. That could be the best prop look on the board for me. Jordan Poole over 3.5 turnovers. DeMar DeRozan over 25.5 points at home to San Antonio. Again, it's not really one I can talk anyone off of. I just obviously have massive concerns around the Chicago Bulls against any bad team because they quite simply don't show up. They seem to play down to the level of their opposition and opponents. The Spurs probably going to be shorthanded tonight as well, starting a massive 9-game road trip for them. So I think that there is potential that the only way this falls under is, again, he, just like the rest of that team, takes it lightly, doesn't really show up in a meaningful way. And so, puts you under an unnecessary amount of stress, just given the fact that he probably won't even take the field goals projected to take. Nick Claxton over 15.5 points today. My only concern there again is when you take out Kyrie, you take out all these playmakers, is he going to have enough opportunity in and around the rim with guys providing him those chances? Jason Tatum, first quarter points over 7.5, I like a lot because he does need to come out and be aggressive, especially if Jaylen Brown's out, then the volume of shots is going to be there. I have no doubts about that. Jalen Duren over 9.5 rebounds. I do like that one for sure. He's going to get the minutes, I think, in this matchup. He's definitely someone who is blowout proof. He's going to get his minutes no matter what the score is. And as much as Boston is improved with Rob Williams out there on the floor, he's going to get looks against both Rob Williams, Al Horford, and basically anyone else that the Celtics choose to run if they do go small ball. So the opportunities for him will be very, very high. I think in that one, I do like that prop as well. Jazz -9 is one that I stared at for a very long time. It's one of those things. Should Utah be laying double digits basically against anyone in the NBA? Probably not, but this is the team that is not NBA quality right now with what they have unavailable. Luka's not playing today. Obviously, they've traded Dinwiddie away. They don't have Dorian Finney-Smith. Frank Ntilikina, I believe, is questionable as well. It'll be a lot of Josh Green minutes, of course, for them tonight, who I'm a big fan of. I think he's a great piece, and I'm surprised they were actually able to hold on to him in a deal for Kyrie. So I couldn't talk you off taking Jazz -9. It's just one of those ones where my numbers are telling me I can't play it, and I'm going to try and show some discipline there and not get involved in that game. But let's go back to the top looks here. Milwaukee first quarter -1. Jordan Poole over 3.5 turnovers. I think we lock in both. Producer Chris, I'm going to go with both here as official squad rides. Let's let them have 2 for today. The top prop being Jordan Poole over 3.5 turnovers. I like that a lot in this matchup, and just the fact that he's going to have extra minutes and extra responsibility with his usage going up. And Bucks first quarter -1. Just because it ties into everything I've said about the Bucks recently against bad defenses. And of course, it is seemingly the most popular squad ride selection in the Discord chat. Everyone's on that one. So we'll ride both of those out today. Let's see if we can go 2-0 on the official squad rides and bounce back in a big way for you guys. Let's hope we can go 2-0 as well on our official best bets for today and keep moving in the right direction there as well. But let's take a look back at some of those questions you guys have thrown in the chat for today. Quickly before we do sign off. If Kevin Durant goes to the Suns, are they automatically a finals favorite in the West? I think so. Ultimately, it obviously depends on what they have to give up in return. But if they have a core of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Mikal Bridges, that's a team that I think merits being favored in the West for sure. Especially if Booker can get back to the level of play he had prior to his injury. I think he was as good as anyone in the NBA. He's come such a long way as a playmaker, not just as a scorer and shot creator for himself. that, moving CP3, I don't think will hurt them in any meaningful way, even in the playoffs. I think he can do that on his own. And obviously having a scorer of Kevin Durant's, status alongside them. And then the defense as well that Durant has been playing this season alongside Mikal Bridges is a sight to behold. So for me, yeah, if the Suns were to get a deal done for KD, assuming they keep hold of Bridges, of course, as part of the package in return, then I think that they will be favorites in the West. And that's probably a position I'd be wanting to take as well. The only team I think that would match up with them in a situation would be the Clippers because of their wings and having Kawhi and Paul George that could go at Kevin Durant and take turns into defending him and Devin Booker respectively. But yeah, that's a really interesting trade proposition. That's one worth keeping an eye on for sure. And if they can get that done, then they've certainly retooled in a pretty quick and meaningful way. Let's get to the next question, though. Do you think the Grizzlies can take the West? No. I'm not a Grizzlies believer in the slightest. I think I touched about it in one of the first Board Better shows that we did. I love the Grizzlies. I think they have a very bright future long term. I still think that the roster is heavily flawed, and I think a lot of that comes to the fore when the playoffs do come around. They've been a bottom 10 offense in the half court all season. They were last season as well, and we saw how much that sort of came back to bite them come playoff time. When you get these teams who can scheme for you specifically, who don't let you run in transition, who don't let you play up-tempo basketball, who don't turn the ball over and let you play off of live rebounds, that's when things really come undone for them. They just don't have the spacing right now for Ja Morant. There isn't enough reliable shooting on the perimeter. I think they're still a couple of seasons away from being genuine contenders, I think, title contenders to even come out of the West. So short answer is no. I'm not a Grizzlies believer. I'll be selling on that team come the playoffs in a pretty meaningful way, I imagine, so long as the roster is still constructed as it is. They're another team who undoubtedly will be trying to buy and add pieces. They're one that's been in the OG Anunoby sweepstakes and will be up until the deadline, I imagine. But even if they do get OG, as much as it makes their defense as good as anyone in the NBA, I think, come playoff time, you still need an offense capable of executing in the half court, and that's not going to move the needle in a way that for me makes a huge difference. So not a Grizzlies believer, and don't think that they're going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs to come out of the West. Two more questions left, I believe. Any examples of best case scenario for the Raptors for their guys that are potentially on the trade block, which of course is OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, and Gary Trent Jr. I think best case scenario for them, especially with OG, will be to try and acquire future assets. I don't think that this is a team that is going to retool and make a run in a meaningful way right now because of, I think, what is still by and large a flawed offense in its own right. They tried to go in a different direction to what everyone else is. They tried to make a roster full of wings that are basically all the same. And unfortunately, it just doesn't quite work. And you look, even during this run, this is a team much like the Grizzlies who are just elite at forcing turnovers, playing in transition, scoring in transition, scoring off of live turnovers, off of live rebounds. But when it comes to half-court basketball, they're a bottom team in every metric in terms of points per possession, effective field goal percentage, open looks on the perimeter, et cetera, et cetera. They're not a team that I think can really just make it up on the fly and retool in a meaningful way, just because the guys as well, especially Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., expiring contracts are not going to bring back a lot in return. So for them, it's just going to be about future assets potentially and a lot of, hopefully, first round pick opportunities that they can then flip that into something potentially more meaningful in the off season versus right now. So I think OG is going to be the only one that can necessarily give them back anything of value immediately versus just the future as well. Final question up, I believe. Can Luka convince Kyrie that the earth is round? I saw a tweet actually that Kyrie in Dallas is dangerous because it gives him the opportunity to delve deeper into some of his conspiracy theories, given, the whole JFK incident that went down there. But look, I hope that Kyrie's off-court drama is behind him. However, I think that's just wishful thinking. This is someone who's just going to bring drama wherever he goes. But that doesn't take away from the fact that what he can do on the court is still as good as anyone, and I think that, like I said, makes them immensely better. So let's just leave it at that for Kyrie Irving and his beliefs. Let's wrap it up though. Like I said, that's all for today. We've got our 2 squad rides locked in. We've got 2 official best bets for today. Giving you my thoughts, obviously, on the Kyrie Irving trade and what we can do with the New Orleans Pelicans short-term and long-term, where I think that there is potential value in the marketplace for them, for us to attack. I appreciate every one of you guys in the chat as always. Thank you for dropping in, and everyone that's listening back on Spotify or wherever it is you catch your podcast. Thank you for supporting the show. Make sure you do drop us a thumbs up before you leave, though, and do leave a review on Spotify. It helps us out a ton. Thank you to my producer, Chris. And guys, I will see you all in a couple of days' time. We'll have another guest lined up, and we will be ready to talk some more basketball with you all.